Ladies and gentlemen, let's begin into the video. As predicted, Nvidia have unveiled the GTX 1080 and GTX 1070. And honestly speaking, these graphics cards are pretty darn impressive and gives us excellent hope for the future of what we can expect for graphics cards on the PC. Now, before we start going into the analysis, I want to point out this is going to be a shorter video than normal when it comes to technical analysis, because I'm still going through a lot of the slides myself, simply because the event happened so darn late in the UK. But I do want to put my initial thoughts out there, and then in the next day or so, hopefully I can do a more in-depth technical analysis. But still. So, there have been some leaks beforehand regarding the performance of this graphics card. Unfortunately, they turned out to be pretty bunk, which I'm actually really happy about, and this is why rumours don't necessarily equate to truth. So, just to get everyone onto the same page, the GTX 1080 is going to ship May 27th, whereas its little brother, the 1070, is going to ship in June 10th. Hopefully we're going to see some decent amounts available at retail. Now, what prices are you going to be expected to pay? Well, obviously it probably does depend upon your region, but it's going to be about $600 US for the 1080. Meanwhile, the 1070 is going to retail at just $379. Now, you might say to yourself, well, gee, that's a lot of price difference. What type of performance are we going to be getting with the 1070? Well, a hell of a lot. So both products are based upon the same graphics core, that's the GP104. We have slightly less information regarding the GTX 1070, but the 1080 has 2560 CUDA cores, which offers about 9 T-flops of computing performance. And this is with the pretty obvious at this point with the amount of rumours, but the well-known GDDR5X memory, which is running at equivalent of about 10 gigahertz. So, as I said, 8 gigabytes is absolutely excellent and is going to serve very well for high resolutions, for example, for virtual reality displays or even 4K, which is absolutely fantastic. Now, as I said, we do know a lot less about the GTX 1070, but it will just be using standard GDDR5 memory and has a performance of about 6.5 T-flops. Now, that is quite a lot of difference in terms of raw performance. However, the insane thing here is that they both of them are faster than the Titan X, which is absolutely bonkers. To put this into perspective, the GTX 1080 is faster than 2 980s in SLI, which is kind of crazy. On stage, they demonstrated the overclockability of these cards, and they actually managed to get to 2114 megahertz, which, I mean, come on now. That was at 67 degrees. Now, it is worth noting that the 1080 operates at a TDP of just a power draw of just 180 watts, which is considerably less than the Titan X, which is operating at about 250. Now, before we jump further into this, there is a couple of little points I want to make. The first is that the actual raw the actual real performance users may still want to hold out until GP100. Obviously, you're going to be coughing up a lot more money, but it kind of makes you wonder what the performance difference is going to be with those cards. As we know, they're going to feature high bandwidth memory too, and obviously a considerable bump in terms of the raw number of shaders, memory bandwidth, and all of the other specifications which come to make up these next generation of cards. It's absolutely crazy to think that the GP104 is going to have about a 20% improvement over the Titan X in terms of raw performance numbers, but about 30% reduction in TDP. That's absolutely crazy. I mean, honestly speaking, whether you're a fan of Nvidia or AMD, I think it's fair to say that the next generation of cards, both Pascal and Polaris, is radically going to alter I guess you could say the landscape, the entire landscape. It could just shake it to the very foundation, because these are the type of cards which are going to make high-resolution gaming actually probable and feasible for the average person. I mean, for the sake of argument, the 1070 is going to cost, rounding it up, about $50 more than the 970, but offers way over 50% improvements in performance, and it's not like the 1070 is a slouch. And if you decide to wait for a while and maybe get some coupons or a rebate, especially if you trade in your old graphics card, it's not like the old graphics card's worth nothing, especially if you've got a fairly up-to-date one. Either Pascal or Polaris is gonna offer a massive amount of performance, and is going to allow games, whether it's The Witcher 3, whether it's the Tomb Raiders in the world, it's going to allow those to run at absolutely crazy resolution and absolutely crazy frame rate. It's going to be absolutely beautiful, and I honestly think that this is what we've needed for some time now. I mean, we've been stuck on a fairly linear performance curve, and to be fair to Nvidia, they did manage to shake things up with the GTX 970. In fact, one could make a pretty compelling argument that the 970, I wouldn't say made the 980 pointless, but the 970 was so much cheaper, and you could overclock the 970, particularly if you went with the some third-party vendors' coolers. It almost made the 980 to be a little redundant, especially once the GTX 980 Ti started to reduce in price as well. It meant that the 980 was in this really weird position in the market. Now, obviously, AMD also made things rather uncomfortable for the 980 as well when they started to cost reduce, and they started to release the 390 and the 390X, especially the 390 at a fairly aggressive price point. So hopefully, what would be absolutely fantastic is if both companies covered all of the pricing. Now, we don't know about the other cards. We can pretty much guarantee that the Nvidia lineup for the 1000 series is going to have the 1060s, it's going to have the 1060 Tis, it's going to have the 1050s, but we don't know what type of performance they're going to offer or what the pricing of those is going to be. What we have heard from AMD is that they are supposedly going to be focusing on the, I guess you could say, the mainstream performance, but what that means is your guess is as good as mine, because you could make a pretty compelling argument that the GTX 960/970 are pretty mainstream in terms of pricing. So if we saw, let's say, a Polaris 10 based GPU, which is very competitive in terms of pricing, let's say the $250 to $350 mark, with absolutely insane performance, it would mean that there's going to be a lot of competition in the marketplace, and that is only good news for us as customers. So finally, I know I'm going to get asked this: should you buy the graphics card? Well, honestly speaking, I don't think you should just jump on any card unless you really need it at launch. And the reason behind that is because a lot of vendors will price gouge you. And I'm not saying that MSIs will gouge you, or Asus's will gouge you, or, you know, Sapphire. I mean the retailers themselves. This is particularly true, and this is one of the reasons I led with hopefully there will be in good numbers in Nvidia getting good yields, because otherwise it's like if there's shortages and people are struggling to buy them, vendors will tack on money, and this happened a lot with several graphics cards. The 8800 GTX, I think it was, and the GTS as well. And there have been a couple of others where the vendors just price gouged. I won't name names, but to see an extra $50 US or 50 Great British pounds added to the price of the RRP was not unreasonable. Plus as well, if you're not desperate, it's good to just wait. I mean, who knows? We could see, for example, what AMD are going to counter with. But, as I've said, on the other hand, if you've got a GTX 970, your friend Bob wants to buy that from you, you've got a G-Sync monitor, there's very little reason, to be honest, why you wouldn't just jump on to the next generation of cards. Because let's say you've got $300, $400 and that's what you can justify spending now, and you can't justify waiting for GP100, it's irrelevant of the performance of GP100. And once again, if you've already got a G-Sync monitor, even if AMD were to counter this with a graphics card that was $50 cheaper with 10% better performance, by the time you factor in things such as, okay, well, I'd have to upgrade to a different monitor solution or what have you, it starts to really become a chicken and egg situation, so I don't really feel that, you know, it's worth it in that respect. However, hopefully you've enjoyed the video. Let me know your thoughts. As I said, there will be a more in-depth technical analysis. Hopefully we're going to see some more slides and information released over the next couple of days. I'd like to wait until we've got the final information, final specifications of the GTX 1070 before I do a complete breakdown, to be honest, because otherwise I'm just using a lot of hearsay. But we'll see. Anyway, hopefully you've enjoyed the video. I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye for now.